Hey crafters, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to show you some easy ways to add mixed media elements to your cards. Hope you enjoy! So one of the great ways to add a mixed media feel to your card is to add some foiling. So I'm going to use some Deco Foil Transfer Gel Duo, and I've just used a palette knife to spread some of this onto my work surface. And then I'm going to use a stamp from the Newton's Nook set called Baa, and I'm going to stamp one of these sheep all over the background. And I'm just going to put them in random places. Now when you're applying this transfer gel to your stamps, if you get a little bit too much on, just stamp it off onto your work surface and then you can stamp on your card. Now this transfer gel works great through stencils as well. If you're using it with a stamp, just be sure to thoroughly clean your stamp afterwards with water to make sure that none of that transfer gel hardens on your stamp. So I've just repeated it on the entire background, and I'll set this aside to dry. Meanwhile, I'm going to stamp a different sheet from the same stamp set, and I'm just using Memento Tuxedo Black ink for this, and I'm going to cut it out. And I've also die cut a 3 3/4 inch circle. And I'm going to add some clouds to this circle, and then I can make a little scene for my little sheep here. So I've used some shaded lilac ink, which is a nice light purple, and I've just applied it with my micro cloud edges stencil. The stencil's from My Favorite Things. Now when you're using a cloud stencil, it's always best to put the ink onto the stencil first and then pull it up or down so that you get a nice gradient of color. So now I'm going to color in my little sheep here, and I just used 3 colors. So I started with C3, which is the cool gray tone. Next, I added the C7, which is my darkest color, around the outside, and then the C5 to blend them together. And I just went back and forth between the colors until I was happy with the blend. And then I used the C7 to add the details around the outside of the sheep. Now once I was happy with that, I moved back onto my circle. So I used a bit of vintage photo distress oxide, and I combined it with the distress grit paste. And this is another great way to add a mixed media feel to your card. So I'm just going to spread it around the bottom of the circle here so that it looks like my sheep is in the mud. And when you're applying it with your palette knife, you can pat the distress grit paste onto it to create a little bit of a texture. And I'm just going to continue building up the mud on the bottom of this circle until I'm happy with the effect. And just like other distress products, this will easily clean up off my glass media mat with a little bit of water when I'm finished. So now I'm going to put some foam squares on the back of the sheep here so that he's a little bit higher than the distress grit mud. And I'm going to put a little bit of mud on the bottom of his feet as well, so it looks like he's fallen into the mud here. And then I'll just build up that mud on the bottom for my cute little scene. This will take a good half hour to 45 minutes to dry, depending on how thick you put your distress grit paste onto your card front. But it's well worth the effort. As you can see, it looks just gorgeous. So now I'm going to create 2 sentiment strips for my card. The first one I'm going to do with shaded lilac, and the next one I'm going to use chipped sapphire. And once they're completely dry, I'm going to use some clear Versamark ink on them. And I'm going to ink emboss my sentiments. So I just use my anti-static bag first. And the sentiments are from the same Newton's Nook stamp set. The first one says, "Oh, sheep." And the second one is more of a birthday sentiment. But you can always change the sentiments for your card. And I'm just heating it from behind with my heat tool. And then I'll move on to the second sentiment. Now the sentiment that I wanted to use for the next one is a little bit longer, but it isn't formatted properly. So I'm just going to use some Post-it note tape, and so I can have some selective stamping of my Versamark. This sentiment reads, "I just heard it's your birthday." And heard is spelt the other way, which fits perfectly with the sheep. So I'm just carefully applying the Versamark through the mask, and then I'll remove the mask, the Post-it note tape, before I stamp it onto my strip of paper. Now once that's stamped, I'm going to heat emboss it with white embossing powder as well. And then I will set my sentiments aside. So now that my background is completely dry, you can see that the sheep are now clear. And I'm going to use a bit of deco foil. This is in the color Rainbow. And I'm going to line it up and then put this through my die cutting machine. You can also put it through a laminator, but the die cutting machine works perfectly. So I'm just going to remove it from the die cutting machine, and then I'm going to carefully peel back the foil to reveal the beautiful rainbow colored sheep. And I'll just put the leftover foil aside for another project, as there's still lots of color on it. All right, now let's put everything together. So I'm going to trim my sentiment so it has a bit of a fancy edge on the side here. And I'll repeat the same on the other sentiment as well. Then I'm going to see where I'd like to place everything on my card. And I had planned to put both the sentiments at the bottom, but I got a bit of a smudge at the top there, so I've moved my "Oh sheep" to the top, and that will cover up that little smudged bit of ink. So then I'm going to just glue my sentiments in place and add the little sheep on top of the bottom sentiment, so you can still read it. And then I'll put the top sentiment on top of my circle. So once I'm happy with where the sentiment strips are, I'm going to trim off the ends on the side there. And now I'm going to put the whole card base onto a black border. Now the finished card size will be 5 by 7 inches. And I did trim the main panel down slightly before I added on the sentiment strips. So this black piece of card is also 5 by 7 inches. And the whole thing will go onto a 5 by 7 inch card blank. And I just used white glue or PVA glue to adhere my card together. Now on the inside of the card, I'm going to add another one of these cute little sheep and a happy birthday sentiment. So I hope this video has inspired you to try some mixed media techniques on your next card. I think a lot of people are intimidated by mixed media, but it really does help to make your card more exciting for the recipient. So I just stamped this cute little sheep and the sentiment with some Distress Oxide and Chip Sapphire. And the last thing I'm going to do is just add in some jewels on the front of the card, and that will help to fill in those white spaces. And these jewels are a nice rainbowy color as well, so it goes well with the deco foil in the background. Now this foil comes in a whole bunch of different colors, so you can always change up the colors for the theme of your card. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video inspiring. Be sure to subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. If you'd like to see another video with foiling, please click here. Have a crafty day!